Good evening, welcome. If it's your first time joining us virtually, you notice that you're all muted and made mute except for the committee co-chairs and the presenters as we move through the agenda. Following the presentation as we move through the agenda, the co-chairs call members of the public wishing to speak. You can you can participate by pressing the raise hand button below. Do not press the wave or thumbs up button and those will appear. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling your phone, please press star and 9 to raise your hand and star 6 to unmute yourself. Be not looking for a prompt asking to confirm muting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is available to text only and not to ask questions of the co-chairs as they will not see the chat. If you're using an older version of Zoom, please make sure to go to React menu, Person menu, or the More features where you will find the raise hand feature there. If you're planning to speak during this meeting, please make sure to name yourself to your first and last name so we know who is speaking during this meeting. And please do not raise or wave at the screen as you have to see you, of course, and try to support.
Thank you so much, John, for giving those details. I think with that, I do want to welcome Andrew and thank you for joining us from DSNY. But before we move on, I would like to request Craig later, our co-chair for the Transportation Committee. He has a presentation which he would like to share with all the neighbors, and it gives the details of the citywide containerization program. So with that, Craig, I'm passing on the baton to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Sahara. Good evening, everyone. Let me just see if I could share my screen. Just bear with me 1 second, please. Let me just find the right window. Okay. Share. Let me make it full screen. Can everyone see the presentation? Actually, that's the end of the presentation.
We can see it.
Okay, let me just make it full screen. There we go. All right. So thank you again. I am very excited to provide this presentation and hope that you'll all come away with it with a better understanding of the containerization program and what the draft environmental impact statement, or DEIS, as I'll refer to it as, is suggesting will be the impacts of the containerization program upon full implementation. This is going to be a very heavy presentation. I'll do my best to try to take a very complex document and demystify it in a community 8 focused manner. I have some experience doing this. I did the same thing with the EIS for the congestion pricing program and for the congestion pricing task force. And anyone who joined those meetings learned way before the general public that the Queensboro Bridge upper level was going to be told, because the document talked about it, but I talked about it at our meetings, but no one picked up on it until all of a sudden it was like, no one told us. Well, we told you. So hopefully you'll get something out of this that is similar. So just a little bit about a program, about the program. And I don't want to step on anyone's toes from sanitation, but I just felt it was important that we provide a little bit of background. So if you're not familiar with the containerization program, it will ultimately result in the elimination of plastic garbage bags being placed on sidewalks by 2032. Buildings with between 1 and 9 units are already required to use small individual bins on wheels known as New York City bins. You see those on the lower right. This initiative will address the remaining 30% of trash that is currently not containerized and will introduce Empire bins, which is how Department of Sanitation is now branding these containers that you see on the upper right. So the impetus for this program is to address various public health and quality issues of quality of life issues that are impacted by loose plastic bags of residential trash piled at the curb. So this includes reducing the rat population, cleaning sidewalk space for pedestrians, reducing injury risk to New York's strongest, reducing runoff from ripped bags that can cause bad odors, litter, and stormwater system pollution. So let's shift into how this program will work. As I mentioned, buildings with less than 10 units already use New York City bins. For buildings with between 10 and 30 units, they are going to have a choice. They will be able to either use those NYC bins or up to 2 Empire bins. In Community District 9, Morningside Heights, West Harlem, where this program is already being piloted, they have a choice of using about 56% of buildings have opted to choose the Empire bins. And for the purposes of this environmental impact statement, sanitation is projecting that 66% will use the Empire bins citywide. For buildings over 30 units, they must use Empire bins and will be allowed to use a maximum of 12 per building for the largest buildings. I should note that the DES talks about alternative means for buildings that will need more than 12 bins. And it wasn't really discussed in there what those alternative means are, but there is that unknown piece, if you will. So Empire bins are installed um, in the parking lane and are secured with alignment blocks that the Department of Sanitation is able to remove for street work. So new automatic side loaders, or ASLs, will be used to mechanically empty Empire bins, as you can see on the left. That will reduce the burden on sanitation workers. NYC bins will continue to be manually emptied into rear loader trucks using the trucks that are currently in the fleet. On streets with both New York City bins and Empire bins, you'll see both of these trucks, and that comes into play later. So there are a plethora of locations where the bins will not be permitted, which you can see on the right. Empire bins are about 10 feet in length, 2 fit comfortably into a parking space, while a third would spill over into a second parking space. A third bin, just to be clear. For buildings requiring the maximum 12 bins, that would require 5 parking spaces be removed. The Department of Sanitation will work with individual buildings to determine specific placement in coordination with New York City Department of Transportation, and it will be largely based on where trash physically exits buildings and curb conditions. There are also siting restrictions for Empire bins delineated in the EIS in regards to public art, parks, and monuments. The Empire bins will be permitted in historic districts, but with some conditions. They won't be able to be physically attached to cobblestone or brick streets, and designated New York City landmarks, scenic landmarks, and historic district properties will go through a separate Landmark Preservation Commission permitting and consultation process. The program will be fully implemented by 2032, and Community District 8 will be at the end of the line. As I mentioned, the first element of removing plastic trash bags was the small building requirement, which went into effect in November of 2024. In 2025, Manhattan Community District 9 began its pilots, and Community District 2 in Brooklyn will follow this fall. So now let's go into the DEIS. So what is a DEIS? I want to just explain briefly, as the purpose of this meeting is really to develop comments on behalf of Community Board 8 in response to its contents. So this is a legally required disclosure document that examines potential impacts of a proposed action. This Department of Sanitation is the lead agency, but coordinates with all other stakeholder agencies, and the Department of Sanitation must respond to every substantive comment made in response to this, which is why it's important that we dig into this document so our feedback can be considered before a final EIS is issued. EISs are a critical part of both the New York State and New York City environmental review process, known as SEQRA and SEEKR. CEQR is the city environmental quality review process. So I'll be referring to that. This process for this program started in September 2025 when a positive declaration was issued, which means that an initial environmental assessment determined that potential significant impacts were possible, which triggered the need for a full EIS. Following a scoping process and the analysis itself, the DEIS was issued on July 1st. Public comments are due on August 7th, and the Department of Sanitation held a public hearing via Zoom on July 28th. Following the close of the public comment period on August 7th, comments will be addressed and a final EIS will eventually be issued. Following the SEQRA technical manual, the DEIS assesses many types of technical areas to determine whether additional analysis is needed to determine whether there may be significant impacts. These are quantifiable metrics that are delineated, and it is important to note that if a threshold is exceeded, it doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a significant impact finding. So the Department of Sanitation consulted with many city and state agencies to conduct its review and looked at many different categories. There were some categories that weren't looked at as they were screened out after being deemed not applicable to this program. So you can see here just the various categories that were assessed in this. So here's the upshot of the DEIS findings. There were no significant impacts that were found to be expected to occur once the program is fully rolled out. Again, that is a technical finding, as it simply means that there weren't any thresholds defined in the seeker manual that were exceeded. In a general sense, here's what that means. For transportation, no amount of mode shifts that may result from loss of parking will have a significant impact on any other form of mobility or other mode of transit. And the overall parking loss in the city of 1.5% of on-street spaces is not considered significant. Air quality and noise thresholds of significance also weren't reached, although we'll talk shortly about the East 91st Street Marine Transfer Station impacts and projected noise increases. Greenhouse gas emissions increased by a very small amount, or projected to, and that amount is not considered significant due to the increased numbers of sanitation trucks. Public health impacts are considered positive as is impacts to disadvantaged communities due to anticipated reductions in vermin and cleaner streets. And historic and visual resource impacts are considered very minor and are well short of what is considered significant. So now let's talk about parking, as I know that is of major interest to our district. On a citywide basis, it is expected that there will need to be about 67,000 Empire bins, with the majority being related to large building needs. The expected parking loss is expected to be about 30,000 spaces out of the nearly 2 million that exist in New York City, which is less than 2% of the inventory. The amount of spaces expected to be lost is significantly higher in Manhattan at about 6.5%. So for Community District 8, it is projected that about 10% of parking spaces will be lost to accommodate Empire bins. This is based on a projected number of bins at around 3,650, which will require about 1,650 spaces for them to be fully installed. We have here in our district the second highest rate of spaces expected to be lost after Community Board 7 on the Upper West Side. Manhattan districts, Community Districts 4 serving Chelsea Clinton and 6 serving East Midtown, Murray Hill, Gramercy also exceed the borough average. The DEIS took a deeper dive at looking at locations in each borough that they identified as what they call prototypical areas to represent the wider borough. And East 76th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenues was chosen as Manhattan's case study due to its mix of building sizes and types. So it is located in what is known as a seeker parking zone 1, which are considered to have extensive subway, bus, walking, and cycling options, as many trips are expected to occur without cars. So for this reason, the seeker technical manual doesn't consider parking shortfalls to be a significant environmental impact. That being said, the EIS looks at 1/4 and 1/2 mile radii to assess expected parking impacts. Overall, parking utilization was found to range from 90 to 96% within a 1/4 mile of East 72nd Street, the prototypical area, depending on the time of day. And it is expected to increase by about 3% as parking spaces are lost for other reasons, even without the program. Upon final implementation of containerization, there will be a parking shortfall during all day parts. Upon final implementation when off-street parking, meaning like garages, get added to the mix, these deficiencies are addressed except for the midday period. When looking at only on-street parking, the DEIS notes that if the radius were expanded to 1/2 mile, that shortfall would also be mitigated. So overall, once off-street parking is counted within a 1/2 mile radius, every peak period shows a surplus of parking, or not a surplus, but that there is some capacity available. And this is the basis for this conclusion that our district would not see a significant parking shortfall. The DEIS then looked to model the cost of these that those impacted by loss of parking would be subjected to. East 72nd Street was the only prototypical area in which the analysis was performed. They assumed that 6% of vehicle owning on-street parking households may need off-street parking overnight within a half mile, and this increases to 14% in the AM peak between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. Based on a projected need to pay for 4.4 days of parking a month and using the more expensive SUV rate of $61 per day, they calculated an estimated cost of $270 for households that would be impacted by this. They also looked at business customers or someone driving to Community District 8 to patronize a local business and found that 16% may need to pay for off-street parking. Now let's shift the focus to the East 91st Street Marine Transfer Station. Because it isn't located near other Department of Sanitation facilities that would share common truck routes, and since it generated enough projected truck volume to require a full hourly review, it was evaluated separately. Lucky us. For this assessment, the DEIS looked at 90th and 91st Streets and York Avenue between 90th and 91st Streets. The DEIS also modeled truck trips and noise screening and concluded that no location citywide, including CD8s, warranted a level 2 traffic analysis or exceeded the noise doubling thresholds that would be considered significant. In this case, they used streets in Inwood as the representative grouping, not much as they did with East 72nd Street for parking. The metric being examined here was whether containerization related truck and employee vehicle trips converging on the Marine Transfer Station would exceed the seeker traffic screening threshold of 50 vehicle trip ends, which is known as personal car equivalents or PCEs, and that would be over in any single hour. The DEIS calculated no more than 30 incremental collection truck trips, which is equivalent to 45 PCEs in the peak hour for the East 91st Street MTS as the maximum during any hour, so no further screening or hourly traffic analysis was needed. Just to be clear, the DEIS also looked at the Marine Transfer Station based on projected PCE increases by shift and found that shift 2 at the Marine Transfer Station, which is from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m., did exceed the initial 50 PCE threshold on Thursdays and Saturdays, which triggered the hourly review. An air quality screening was also conducted, which looked at a unit of equivalent heavy-duty diesel vehicles, or HDDV, which has a threshold of 12 added HDDV trips per 24 hours for East 90th and East 91st Streets as local roads, and 23 for York Avenue, which is considered classified as a minor arterial road. Since the values determined were well short of the threshold, no further PM 2.5 or PM 10 analysis was determined to be necessary. Noise screening produced a very close result and nearly triggered additional analysis. A ratio of 2.0 or more, or a doubling of future noise PCE volumes with versus without the program, would require detailed modeling. At the Marine Transfer Station, Saturday morning noise increase levels were calculated to have a 1.91 ratio, which is just short of that trigger, which is equivalent to about a 3 decibel increase. So in short, the DEIS findings regarding the MTS were that there will be no significant impacts regarding traffic, air quality, or noise. But there is one additional analysis performed in which levels exceeded the 50 PCE threshold, and that is when the DEIS looked at Community District 8 as a whole, in which case the initial screening threshold was exceeded, maxing out at about 55 PCEs. Again, as I stated earlier, this is because there will need to be additional trucks deployed for trash collection to accommodate both types of bins. And ASL's collecting trash from containers. So we were the only district to exceed this 50 PCE threshold and require the additional screening. So the Department of Sanitation modeled how these trips would actually be made and impact individual streets. Due to the routing that they use for trash collection, the 18.5 incremental truck amount expected to be generated is spread across the entire district. So on a per street basis, the program adds at most 2 incremental trips from ASL trucks, one from each arm side of a one-way street. So overall, maximum incremental impact identified on any single community district 8th Street is 3 truck trips per day, well below the significant impact threshold. And just a bit more on why there's going to be some increase in truck traffic. So the way that ASLs work is that there are mechanical arms that only sit on one side of the vehicle. So in order for trash to be picked up on both sides of the streets, it requires a second truck with a right-hand arm as opposed to a left arm, or vice versa. And then blocks that have power bins and NYC bins need both types of trucks to operate, ASLs and the traditional rear loaders. Oh, sorry, I did not mean to. Let me just go back to that slide. And then finally, because of where the marine transfer station is located, there are some routes that have shared pinch points, so it could generate additional traffic to our marine transfer station over here. So this is really not just an outlier situation, it's just a matter of circumstance why this would be a case. So that's basically what the DEIS considers and states, and hopefully it gives us all enough of a familiarity with it to be able to develop a set of comments that we can formally submit as a community board. So I'm happy to field any questions and we'll try to answer them as best I can, but I don't want to speak for the Department of Sanitation. I would hope that they can answer any questions pertaining to the program itself before I or anyone else among our chairs try to interject. So thank you, and I hope you found this helpful.
Thank you so much, Craig. I just want to, so are you going to remove your slides, Craig?
I will, and I'm happy to put them back on if someone has any questions about them.
I think that's a great idea, because then I can see who is, so I think I see Andrew. By the way, Craig, that was an amazing presentation. Thank you for taking us through all of that.
Sahar,
Yes.
you want sanitation to be heard first if they can?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm sorry, I'm having some trouble with my computer, so absolutely, please, could you?
Yeah. And Sahar, maybe before we go to anyone commenting from the public, maybe we could see if sanitation has any comments or feedback that they would like to provide.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Good evening, everyone. My name's Andrew Hoyles from Department of Sanitation. I'm out of the Bureau of Public Affairs. I work on all things sanitation for new programs and old. I think, Craig, that presentation was really great. I'm not going to, on this call, sort of reanalyze the DEIS. That's posted, actually. So on our website, we do have the video of the presentation that our containerization team provided. We also have the presentation itself on the website, and also and I think, Craig, I think that they're very similar. So great job as far as you putting that together. But what I want to say that is just because that's the information that the Department of Sanitation has publicly submitted to the public. That's the information where draft comments can be submitted to, reflecting on that information. And then the DEIS itself, the 180 or so page document plus its appendices, are also available on the website. So I think those are really great places to start. There were some general questions, but specifically, I hope to be able to speak on programmatic questions and things like that. But I did want to, clarify, like the Department of Sanitation's communicated how this program exists from the DEIS standpoint, and I think we're pretty proud of the no significant adverse impacts being part of that. And then this is a public process, so comments, certainly as part of that, hearing from the public, from all members of the public, as they're thinking about this major program that's going to really, uh, change how New Yorkers manage trash and how they deal with trash, and even just the cityscape as far as parking goes. We know that that's a huge um, concern, fear, and consideration that goes into how Department of Sanitation is managing its waste and doing so in a way to protect its workers and to protect the cityscape itself.
And
Thank you, Andrew, for giving us those details.
I have a question, Andrew. Well, excuse me, Sahar. I have a question, Andrew. Hopefully you can answer. If you're in a building that has the garbage that goes directly into the basement and these very large containers that are then picked up and loaded onto sanitation trucks directly, will you still be able to use those? Or will you have to go through the outside containers? See that right now, the buildings like that don't have any outside containers or bags. They just go from the large metal container into the sanitation truck.
Andrew needs to be, I think, unmuted, please.
Thank you. So I'll explain some of the details around how buildings work with this program, because I hope that will help clarify. Buildings that have 1 to 9 units, as Craig outlined and it's outlined in all of our literature, those buildings are going to, through containerization rules, be using individual NYC wheelie bins. Buildings with 10 to 30 residential units have the option they can during the time when the program expands to that zone. There's essentially an opt-in period, and those buildings that have 10 to 30 units choose. They choose either through the property manager, through the building owner, or through the co-op board, how they would like to participate. Would they like to participate with individual wheelie bins for all their trash, the NYC bin, or would they like to opt in for the Empire bin? For the larger buildings that have 31 or more units, they would be required to be using Empire bins, unless they have some other type of sanitation containerization method, such as Easy Pack or roll-on, roll-off containers that come with buildings that are on that have either internal or external compactors. And that's usually for, really specific buildings have those, but if they do have those, then sanitation knows that they have those types of service. We want to be altering those collections. So the individual's question said if there was material going down the chute that's going to a compactor, and if that was the case where the building has, compactor that goes to one of our roll-on, roll-off containers, then we wouldn't be changing that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. So it's going to be kind of a hybrid in some ways, that the way that Chuck mentioned about the building, that one would remain and won't come in the parking spot.
Well, let me also, sorry, as the light's turning off in this office, sorry, this always happens in the evenings. Most buildings don't have roll-on, roll-off container or Easy Pack. Most buildings throughout the city. So I hear you say hybrid, and I think that's the right use, but also I want to just name majority of buildings throughout the city do not have that type of collection.
Right.
Can you explain then what I said I wasn't clear on, and I don't know that the DES went into those details. So for buildings, the largest buildings that are not going to be able to work with just 12 and would need more, what are those alternative options that they may have?
Yeah, so the other types of collection that sanitation has are with basically the other types of containerization require our collection trucks, which are called roll-on, roll-off containers. Those types of buildings have compactors that compress all the material, all the trash that's refuse into a container, right? And then we haul that container for its disposal, right? The other type of collection apparatus is Easy Pack, and these are typically for large institutions or very large buildings, but sometimes people have seen them at schools. Pretty typically, I think the public would generally see them at schools or very, very large buildings. But you know, just naming those, because those could be two alternate pathways or processes. But you know, the larger buildings right now, we are still testing in M9 and also in Brooklyn too. We are testing using multiple Empire bins. So I do think we're going to still be looking at see like, okay, how do we make this work for these very large buildings? There are some very large buildings in Brooklyn Community District 2, similar to you know, Manhattan 8, and that's where we're looking right now. There's still going to be some findings that have to be reported out in this final document, though, and I will have to wait and see what's in there.
Got it. Thank you. With that, I think I'm going to move to Andrew for Andrew, can we unmute him? Please go ahead with your question.
Oh,
Hi, thank you so much,
different Andrew.
Sahar, and the other Andrew, great name, and Craig for the really great explainer. Really appreciate it. To say that this plan is batshit crazy, in my opinion, would be an understatement. The idea that there's no significant transportation impact, the threshold being 1.5%, yet on the Upper East Side, it's 10%. That's a 666% above the threshold to call it no significant impact. The Upper East Side, according to your own numbers, has 90 to 96% utilization of parking. To take 10% of the parking away would put us at 100 to 106%, which is completely not feasible. Second, on my block, I live on 84th Street between 3rd and Lex. We have 4 buildings, doorman buildings on each corner that comprise 600 units. That would require approximately 20 dumpsters just on our block, and that would be at least 40% of the entire parking on our block. And not only is it aesthetically unpleasing, you have the graffiti, you have the smell, you have 24/7 dumpsters versus garbage bags that be on the street generally between midnight and 6 a.m. We're talking about a Department of Sanitation, sadly, that Valerie is my witness. We've gone through this a million times with sanitation, just simply maintaining the corner cans, where the Department of Sanitation has somehow been unable to simply sweep out the cans when they empty them. They cannot close the doors. They certainly do not power wash them. So I have zero expectation that the Department of Sanitation will come through and power wash all these various dumpsters on our streets. We can expect the stench to be really unbearable. One thing, thank you, Craig, for pointing out, that I didn't realize was that in terms of trucks, we're like practically tripling the number of trucks, because I didn't realize that not only do you need the regular trucks that take the regular bags, you need a right arm truck and a left arm truck. So we're talking about a boatload of trucks. All I can say here is we just have to just say no. I appreciate what the Department of Sanitation is trying to accomplish. I had this conversation with former Commissioner Tisch about containerization, and my impression at that point in time was that it would be 64-gallon rolling bins, which were completely logical. But to think that we're going to take 10% of our streets for 24/7 dumpsters is ridiculous, and I really hope that that our elected officials and our community board work their hardest to block this. Thank you for your time, and thanks to all involved.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll go next to Lo van der Walk. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Correct me, please. I am.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Lo van der Valk. You did pronounce it correctly. Thank you.
Fabulous. Okay. Go ahead.
Speaking on behalf of Carnegie Hill neighbors, I just want to say that so many things that Andrew Fine just commented on are very relevant to our community and to all of the Upper East Side, really. And I think, you know, I think we have to view this proposal with great reservations, because the alterations to the streets and the alteration in terms of parking and the alterations on how these trucks pick up the trash and whether the permanent bins will be kept clean. I mean, those are huge issues. And one of the nice things about the current system, which I know nobody likes, but over the weekends, you walk down the sidewalks and things are clean and you don't see any trash and you don't smell anything. That will be altered in the future. So I really think we need a longer period to evaluate all the implications. And they are many and significant, as Andrew Fine mentioned. And I really think, we need to take a slower second look and ask many more questions. And it would be nice if we also had some videos and some maps that we could look at to see exactly what's involved, because a lot of it is just verbiage and you have to imagine it in your mind, and some better means of communication of what the implications are would be very helpful. Those are, for the time being, our comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luvan. I had one question as well, actually, before I move to Elaine. Andrew, what about the streets? Because we are a hub for all the hospitals, literally, in Manhattan, pretty much. Like, every hospital is literally coming and constructing one in our area. What about those areas? What about those streets where you do have these big buildings, residential buildings in the midst of those hospitals as well? How will you handle that? Because the parking spaces are needed and multiples of those are needed. And it's not just the ambulances coming in, but people dropping their patients as well in cars. And they have to quickly find a parking spot as well at times. How do we handle that? We have many schools as well, so that's another thing.
So
What about the
Empire bins are only placed in locations where public parking exists. So while I understand, I'm a New Yorker, I understand many people park in places where they can't be parked at, or they're standing in locations where they use the space that's available to put the vehicle there. Empire bins are sited only in locations where a car can be placed, where sanitation, not standing zones or no parking zones, that they have to be specifically in locations that would be parking. So while I understand the condition of, maybe this being by a hospital or something like that, it's the same. It would be the same throughout the city, wherever a car could be sitting and be parked there. That is the only type of location that an Empire bin could be sited and be placed at for curb.
I understand, but like we have so many and we only have not enough parking areas, especially around those. So taking away more would be just it's harder.
The trade-off we're trying to be incredibly clear that this is a trade-off of that Department of Sanitation thinks is incredibly worthwhile to repurpose private parking spaces for public trash, Empire bins, or stationary on-street containers, as they're called. Two clarifying points, and I want folks to and understand that the community board is meeting also to be able to generate their comments that they want to submit. Just for clarity's sake, I know everyone's not going to read this document or review all of the things on the webpage. The Empire bins themselves, they are locked, so 24/7 access is allowable to building staff who have access key cards or the fobs to those bins. And then our vendor, there's a private vendor that's associated with this program that is at minimum required to have quarterly cleanings for the bins. However, the bins themselves are required to be, it's essentially an extension of the property line, where property managers and owners of property in the city of New York are required to clean up to 18 inches, clean their sidewalk up to 18 inches into the curb. It's the same thing with the Empire bin, where property managers or owners would be required to clean 18 inches from that Empire bin, around that Empire bin.
Okay.
I did have a video of one of them. I don't know if I'll be able to actually share it with this, but I would say also just, And again, I'm not trying to, I wanted to be able to answer that individual's question. If they want to see some of those videos, we were putting some of those or some of the pictures in that report, in that you can look at some of the pictures and see some of the realness of it. Since it is a pilot only fully rolled out in one zone, it's hard to see citywide what it actually physically looks like. I'm just going to stand up to turn the light back on.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew, you can text it to me also. Just sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say you can, yeah, maybe I could post it in the chat.
And just want to add that please do check our chat, because John is sharing a lot of very important documents, and also sharing a YouTube link where you can learn a lot about this. There was a so please do check the chat, because you can find those links there. Next, I'll go to Elaine. Elaine Walsh.
Thank you. And I appreciate the time that the community board has put into this, and that sanitation has shown up. I'm a resident of the community and have lived here my entire life. I'm also president of the East 86th Street Association. I'm sorry if I was a little late. I lost my phone. But let me tell you, if you haven't covered it, my concerns. One, cleaning a dumpster quarterly will not alleviate the smell. I just went down 61st Street. I'm sure that one is a private one done quickly, but it's overwhelming. My issues are the practicality of this. I live on 79th Street. We have a single lane now because it's a bus lane. How does my building put out a container? Where does it put it? And from what I see in the photos, you're going to surround the container with a metal divider. So when it snows, how does it get cleaned? How does sanitation come through and clean the streets every day? You talk about, and it's, by the way, 17 inches from the street to the street. How do the staff get to clean if, unless you're expecting they're going to lift up these containers? And I'm sure there's a union violation there. But listening to this, we have elderly and old people living in the community. We have the largest elderly population in the city, okay? How are they going to get around all of this and get out of their building to get transport? None of that has been identified. I think what New York has done, and once again made an error, has looked at Boston. Oh, they have alleys. We don't have alleys. So these bins are going to be in the street. But I have no understanding, and I agree with Andrew, sanitation doesn't clean its garbage cans. You think they're going to come out and clean? And let me ask, on alternate side days when sanitation comes in, how are they going to do this? What do you do with the bins? And I'd like to see the data that shows a decrease in the number of rats. I know from our experience as an association, the rats are in the tree beds and they're eating away at everything. They're not walking up and down the sidewalk. I mean, sometimes we do see them. But I am concerned about this movement forward. And I'd like to know, what's the cost to us of doing this? What are we saving? And when you say, you know, you won't have garbage on the street, so do the buildings only put the garbage in the container when they're going to get picked up? So I'd like some answers to this. I'm totally opposed to this. I think it's an insult to us all. And the people who made up this idea, you got to go back to the drawing board, because it does not work in CB8. It is horrendous. And it's an imposition, whether you're an assisted living facility or a small building or a medium building or a high rise. And I'm not sure, I mean, we do garbage compacting in our building. I'm not sure. And the other question has not come up. You're talking about garbage. What are we doing with the recycling? How is that being dealt with? Because you don't put it in the container, do you? So I'd like some answers to all the recycling and composting we're required to do, and how does it compare to general population garbage? Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Elaine. Andrew, do you want to answer some of her questions?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Am I still muted? I'm trying to jot some of those down. I'll start with recycling and composting. That was the last bit of the question. So this is the Empire Bin or Stationary On-Street Container Program is specifically for trash or for refuse, not for recycling or for compost. Although the rules for compost include material has to be set out in a bin. The bin can be 55 gallons or less with a
Yeah,
secure
you know
lid.
that.
And then the material that's in recycling, no change to that rule either. So that means the recycling can be out either in bags or in bins that are 55 gallons or less. The only difference is the set out time rules that are associated with those programs. Jumping over to when the material goes into the Empire Bin, in M9, Manhattan 9, one of the things where a lot of building staff are proponents of the program, from what we've heard, is because material goes directly from their shoot rooms or from their collection in either their buildings. It's going to say lobby, but what I mean is the area where they store trash before it was formerly placed on the curb in bags. It goes directly into the Empire Bin. That's where it is stored, right? Whether that bag's been compacted or whether that bag hasn't been compacted and it was just tied up by a staff worker and put it in there. So there's no coming back to retrieve a bin. If there was a local law 111 building that had to have bins for all their trash, even though it was a high-rise building, the material just goes there. Rat sightings and M9 have been down for month over the past year of the program for, I believe, 24%. So as far as the metric that is available to us as the agency for how we're tracking it, which is based off 301 reports, it has been down double digits for the year of the pilot, which has been going on for over a year, about a year and a quarter at this point.
Thank you, Andrew, for answering all those questions. So just wanted to understand it. You mentioned that recycling and compost, that would not go in this, right? So does that mean that, like, how does that work? So when would that be picked? Who is picking that? Is that another truck coming in to pick those?
So
Yeah,
I'll touch on that too. And this came up with one of the other comments. So it would be a separate truck. Sanitation uses a truck for compost, for recycling, and then we would have both the automated side loader that has the left arm and the right arm. Right, there's one for the left arm or the left side collections, one for the right side collection, and then there would be a dedicated rear loader, which is your traditional regular old garbage truck. We between shifts clean the truck is emptied, and then we use that, we'd use the same truck for another commodity, for another material type. But essentially that's we have to separate out the material type so that there's not contaminated or mixed. They're going to different final disposals or processing facilities, which is why we have to use different collection vehicles. In M8, there are 3 trash days, either Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And then everyone has 1 recycling day of the week. So that recycling day is when compost, MGP, metal, glass, plastic, and cartons, and paper are set out at the curb.
So then they're basically on one street, there would be 3 trucks coming, one with the
Correct.
left, one with the right, and then there would be one for just the recycling material and the composting.
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
And at the moment, we have just one that's picking up everything.
Yes, for trash, for refuse.
Okay, so we have a lot more. Elaine, I'll come back to you. Let me take others and then I'll come back to you. Thanks, Andrew, for answering these things in detail. Leonard, can we have him unmuted, please?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. And I have, I guess, some similar comments, so I'll try not to duplicate, but I have to say, just hearing this and understanding it and visiting some of the areas where it's been implemented already, this is probably the worst quality of life initiative I've seen in the city and as long as I've been here, and it's pretty bad. Just a quick back of the envelope calculation for my building, we'd require 12, which would essentially wall off the front of our building with dumpsters. I think, anybody who's familiar with dumpsters in a business setting or other settings know they don't age well. And the examples of how poorly our corner trash bins are maintained, doesn't bode well for big, gigantic, multiple dumpsters in front of every residential building. So this is a serious quality of life issue. Trading off 24/7 dumpsters for, short periods of time with bags or smaller bins is just not a good trade-off. It makes no sense from a quality of life perspective at all. And just hearing now, essentially tripling the trash number of trucks, the loudest, most traffic inducing vehicles on our streets is just, makes it even worse. So that's not good. Dumpsters will inevitably be smelly, they'll be filled with garbage in the hot summer and sealed up, and that doesn't bode well for cooking trash in front of a residential building. The loss of parking, I think Andrew mentioned 10%, that's significant. That will induce a lot of people circling looking for spots and more congestion on top of 3 trucks versus 1 picking up garbage. So that's not good. We didn't get an answer to how street cleaning works. I think we all know you miss 1 or 2 street cleaning cycles on a block because of a parked car, which isn't good, or some other obstruction, and the street becomes pretty disgusting pretty quick. So street cleaners are heroes in my mind. They do, yeoman's work, and it's critical. So how will that street cleaning be done with these, largely permanent 24/7 dumpsters and the associated structures? That's not good. And I got to tell you, expecting a building to hose down their street isn't the answer and shovel up the stuff. So that's an issue. And then, across the street from my building, 3 large buildings are spanned by a city bike rack. We can debate that, good or bad, but how does that building get dumpsters in front of it? Are we going to remove the city bikes, or are they going to, go in front of some other building? It just doesn't feel well thought out. But I guess my summary is, walling off buildings with big, ugly dumpsters 24/7 is not the answer to our trash problems. And I'm sorry, but, a dumpster 24/7 in front of a building isn't equivalent, as I think someone had said, to a car being parked there. It's just not. They don't smell as much. Dumpsters are disgusting. They don't age well, and they're going to be, a blight on our neighborhoods. And I think the extra work associated with landmark buildings is testament to that this isn't something that's benign. If someone's lucky enough maybe to have a landmark designation, and they have to, that says something, that extra work has to be done to preserve the integrity of that neighborhood. Well, let's not just trash, no pun intended, the integrity of everybody else's neighborhood by walling off our buildings with big, permanent, 24/7 smelly dumpsters. I think Andrew said it well when he introduced how crazy this plan is, but this would be the worst quality of life initiative I've seen in a long time in our city. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Leonard.
And I think the street cleaning question was asked before, but we didn't get an answer from sanitation, so that one might help. But those are my comments. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for reminding me of the street cleaning question, and your comment. And I thought I had, the reason I skipped, I thought I had addressed it, but I'll reiterate what the rule is. Unfortunately, nobody likes the rule, but I want to be clear that it is just citywide. The property owner, the property manager, whoever is the responsible for that building, they are required for cleaning 18 inches, the sidewalk up to 18 inches into the street. That is what the rule is. That includes, now for Empire bins, that includes essentially that expanse around the Empire bin. It's like kind of like an extension of where sanitation would measure, I guess, what area needs to be cleaned. And typically when I'm explaining this, I want people to understand this is what the rule is. Every single property throughout the city of New York. It's based on the sort of agreement that property owners have with the city of New York, that the city requires their involvement in keeping it clean. So to really drill into the question, it means that the property management of that building, their building super, the building porter, the building owner, they have to maintain the cleanliness around that area. So ASP still happens. We still have our mechanical brooms. They still go down, but the broom isn't driving up against the mechanical broom. Sorry, I just want to be clear what the terms I'm using. It's not driving up against an Empire bin. That area, essentially would be cleared out of vehicles because the ASP time would be in effect. Cars would be vacant from that area, and then the the mechanical broom would drive through to clean that area. Now, the areas within the Empire bin in there that should, according to the rule, have been cleaned or approached by that property owner or property manager as per the rule.
So what you're saying is, Andrew, that this mechanical broom will because if you have one, you have one of this Empire bin, then you have space for two parking spot that cars are moved. Then again, you have two, because on my street, there's so many big buildings, 31 plus units. So I just don't understand how, because it needs one flow to clean, right? It can't have stoppages constantly. So how does that work? I feel like then the streets, the avenues would be cleaned, because I saw that on the avenues, you can't have that. Where the city bikes are, you can't have that. But how do you clean the streets? I'm on a street. I'm still confused how that would work to clean anything,
Yeah. Sorry for beating around it, but if there's an Empire bin and then an 18-inch sort of from the direction of that bin would be required to be cleaned by the property manager, right? So our mechanical broom would not be driving into a space it can't fit into for that reason, right? So for it to be cleaned, it's on the property owner.
Okay. And one question that I wanted to ask before I go on the next one, Andrew, was, do you guys have a time frame that that benefit of saving time by switching to this? Because when one of those trucks passed through my street, cars stop for a very long time because the guys are picking up those bags and dumping them into the truck, and it takes a very long time, and the traffic stops. Is there some benefit to this? Does this go faster? Are we saving any time at all by using this partially mechanized system?
I mean,
Or
it's
is
definitely
that even
safer for the
increasing the time?
workforce. It's definitely safer for the workforce, which is that's something we want to, have. Sanitation has to manage millions of pounds of materials daily at the curb. It's a lot of material that New Yorkers put out every single day for us to collect. So it does take time. The sort of efficiencies are gained in the fact that the truck is collecting from one specific zone. There's not a sanitation worker looking for one specific spot. The sanitation worker is not looking for deposits of bags in various places, right? The truck is going to these specific spots to service them.
Have you done a study? Has been some research, since you've already been doing this in the other community board, did you do a research study, and did you find that it saves time?
I'm not aware of a specific time-based analysis on the program, but yeah.
Maybe that should be done as well, just to see, because it always that is also something that's it takes too long and the traffic is stopped, and that's already, and now that we are going to have, instead of one truck, we'll have 3 trucks. So that adds on as well to the time that the traffic is stopped in that street. But thank you so much, Andrew. I'll move on. I'm going to wait. The community board members, I'm going to come back to you later, but I have many other hands. I will request that, although everybody is what you're saying is so important, but just to be considerate of the time, if you can just if it has already been discussed, then please speak of something you want to add on. So I'm going to ask Jeffrey or to be unmuted, please. And if you can keep your comments brief and have your questions for Andrew, that would be great.
Great, thank you. I'll try to be as concise as possible. So one question that I had, the first question I had is there a requirement as to the number of apartments per Empire bin? So for example, my building has about 100 apartments. How many of these bins can we expect to be lined up in front of our building? It's my first question. And then regarding the aesthetic of our neighborhoods, I can only imagine what it's going to look like. For example, I'm on a one-way, narrower street, and the front door of my building is directly across the street from the front door of the building across the street. So I can only imagine how unsightly it's going to be to pull up to the awning and face these bins when unloading my passengers and unloading my car when I pull up to my building, or even being dropped off by a cab or Uber. And with these bins being out on the street 100% of the time, you mentioned it's the responsibility of the property owners for picking up and cleaning around the bins. I can only envision there being more trash left outside and around the bins from those people that decide to just throw their trash on the side of the container since the bins are locked and they can't access it. I'm concerned that this is going to be more effort on the building staff to maintain and therefore increasing our maintenance responsibilities and costs in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Oh, and I did have one more comment, by the way. In Community Board 8, we mentioned that in our area, it's going to be about 10% are lost parking spots. I'm one of those at Street Park when I come home every day, and I can bet that I'm one of those in that statistic that's going to end up paying for parking. Is the city going to subsidize the cost for parking my vehicle now in a garage?
It's going to be $270 per month extra.
Exactly. So I can add that to my already thousands in maintenance that I'm paying.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Jeffrey, for your comments. I'm going to next go to Alexander Billy. And thanks for being brief, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I want to offer a different perspective. I strongly support expanding the trash containerization throughout the city. Our current system of piling loose garbage bags on the sidewalk it's embarrassing. Visitors photograph the rats, leaking bags, the trash scattered across our streets. Then they take those stories home with them and broadcast it across the world. For a city that considers itself a global capital, our trash collection system often looks closer to that of a developing country. The bags tear, they leak, people and animals rummage through them, they leave garbage across the sidewalks. It's filthy, unpleasant, and entirely avoidable. At some point, the opposition sounds like it's coming from the rat lobby. The concern about losing parking spaces is also badly misplaced. We should not prioritize free curb spaces for private cars over clean streets and usable sidewalks. Car ownership in Manhattan's a luxury. You can look at the statistics. Very few people own cars in the city. And those that do have a car can afford to park it. The rest of the city should not be forced to pay to live with mountains of garbage in order to preserve a small number of parking spaces for the elite. Trash containers are a basic common sense improvement. They will reduce access to food for rats, as you've already heard, double-digit reductions in rat populations month on month for many months. They'll prevent bags from leaking and being ripped open, which, by the way, lasts for weeks and not days. Improve public health and quality of life. New York City is a world-class city, and it should live up to those terms. We should move quickly with this proposal.
Thanks, Alexander. Thanks for your comments. I'm going to go next to Karen Scherf.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble unmuting and I can't seem to get my picture up, but I live on East 72nd Street, and I know in the September meeting, we're gonna bring up, or I think it's on the agenda to talk about the bike lane on the cross-town bike lane on 72nd Street. How do these bins work with that cross, with the bike lane? That's my question.
I think Andrew is again muted.
Thank you. So sorry about that, because I was muted. So I'm not familiar with the specific intersection that you're speaking about, but generally, like the program works by citing the bins where parking can take place. So if there's a bike lane and the bike lane is abutted with the sidewalk on, say, the left, and then on the right would be a parking lane, then the Empire a parking lane that has regular ASP cleaning. It's not like a no standing, or it's not like a buses only parking, or not like a TLC only parking, something like that. Then we could work, when we work with DOT on citing every location, it could be cited in that location. So that's generally how I'm thinking of how it works in M9, where there is a bike lane as well. It would be where there would have been a parking, which is still there potentially, but there's also the ability for an Empire bin to be cited in that location.
But that would be further out from the curb than 18 inches. So then the buildings that have those bins wouldn't be responsible for cleaning them? Is that what you're telling me?
The building that would have it would be responsible for cleaning it. Yeah, they still would be.
Even if they're across two bike lanes, and that just seems kind of crazy to me. Okay, that's my comment.
Okay. Thanks, Karen, and thanks, Andrew, for answering. I'm going to go next to Lucy. Lucy Coteen.
Hi, hello. I have a lot of questions about the trucks for one. How many ASL exist now? How many does the city need, and what does each one cost? And is it right that taxpayers now have to pay what will be millions and millions of dollars for all the new trucks? And by the way, you left out another truck besides from the ASL and the recycling. The composting is a separate truck. So that's another truck. How many is that? 4? And both sides of the street, the ASL, like right now, if the garbage men go down a one-way street, that one truck takes care of both sides of the street. So now if it's now they'll have to go down, both sides of the street. Anyway, you're talking about a lot of noise, a lot of trucks, a lot of traffic disruption for these. So anyway, my first point is talk about the cost. And with all the costs that the city has right now, is it fair to add millions and millions of dollars in addition to that, along with all the housing they plan to put in, the needs of the homeless, and the education, etc.? Another question is, what happens when we have a big snowfall? Like last year, we had 14 inches of snow a couple of times. How will the street cleaners clean the streets? Will they end up just piling all that snow up against the bin? So now you have those bins snowed in with a big pile of snow, and which will become, as we see what happens with the piles of snow, they become filthy, dirty, disgusting ice piles that last until they melt. So that's another question. Are they graffiti proof? What's to prevent them being spray painted all over with graffiti? That's another question I'd like answered. I think that's most of them. One other thing, why are the needs of car owners so unimportant? As the one gentleman said, I think he drives a taxi maybe, I don't know. But hey, these are people who have paid for their car, pay taxes into the city, and they're not all elite. They're not all rich. Many of the people have lived in the neighborhood for years, and have had their cars for years before it was such a pricey neighborhood, for one thing. Why are their needs not just as important as everybody else? So those are my questions. Start with the cost, what the cost is going to be. How many do we need? What's the cost of each of these ASL trucks?
Thanks for all those questions. I don't have the total number that would be needed citywide. I'm not off the top of my head sure if it's in the DEIS, but that's where I would start for reviewing that. The trucks themselves are over $500,000 per truck. These are specifically retrofitted and designed trucks that are part of the truck is built in Europe, part of the truck is built in the United States, and they're assembled in the United States. So this truck doesn't exist. It did not exist before the pilot in Manhattan Community District 9 started. And it was designed specifically with New York City in mind. So it is a pretty tailor-made program. The truck specifically would have to have a left and a right version. So there is at least 2 of these ASL or automated side loading trucks necessary per zone, but there would be more than 2 per zone. I'm just looking at my notes for the other questions you asked. I think the snow was a big one because this was a really big snow year for us in M9. And actually it worked very successfully. We were happy to see. Our plowing operation or snow moving or snow hauling operations, those are going to continue with the vehicles that we have, including these ASL trucks, the automated side loading trucks. We put plows on them as well, and they can be used to push and move snow. But the snow removal operation is, I'm going to go back to the property managers on this one. Within the rules, like property owners and managers, they're responsible for clearing snow from the sidewalk, and they would be responsible for, I see some head shaking. I think that there's this maybe confusion that we're requiring owners to shovel snow out, but they would have to utilize that bin. They would need to clear that snow from it. Right, there are 3 ways to access the bin. There's a foot lifter. You'd have to remove the snow from there. If there is an arm attachment, you'd have to. If there's snow on the lid, you'd have to. The owner or whoever is using that bin would have to remove the snow from there. But sanitation, we do dig those out so that they can be serviced by the automated side loading trucks, because we clear the snow from the road where these bins are located. Okay, so it's a bit of a mouthful. Graffiti proof. No, I wouldn't say they're graffiti proof, but they do have a coating on them to make sure that it's harder for graffiti to be applied to the bins. And then we do those at minimum quarterly cleanings, they do remove graffiti from the bins if that is noted on them. Did I miss any? One of the tricky things is some of these are comments, and some of these are specific questions. So I'm trying to be respectful with what comes out as a question to me, and what comes out as a comment, which I think is certainly fine to have. But I'd want to also be respectful for time.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think, Andrew, you covered all. I'm going to move next to, wait, I can't see. I think it's Elaine. So Elaine, I'm again going to go first to Vanessa. Those that haven't spoken yet, I want to go first to them, and then come back to you. So Vanessa.
Thank you so much for giving me time to speak. My questions are, and forgive me if you've already answered this, the inside of the bins, how frequently will the inside of the bins be cleaned? The bins extend, in my estimate, way more than 18 inches beyond the sidewalk. If the building is cleaning 18 inches, there's a lot of dirt and muck that's going to collect around the bins. We already have a huge problem that the street cleaners, the machines that come down the street, the cars don't move, the street cleaners just drive right by. I just foresee a really serious cleaning problem. And, I know someone earlier talked a lot about, rats and torn up bags. I just think it's important to focus on the fact that with the compost bins, a lot of the food is out of the trash in the compost bins, and the bags are no longer being torn open. And we in our building have to put our bags out at 6 a.m. in the morning for them to be picked up. You know, the number of hours the bags are allowed to be on the street is very short and very restricted now. So anyway, those are my comments. Thank you so much for taking me.
Sounds good. I think those were comments, right, Vanessa? So, Andrew, do you want to say something? Otherwise, I'll ask Wendy to go next.
No, just the cleaning inside the bin would be through the regularly scheduled cleaning inside the bin. The property owner or the building that has the Empire bin, they're not required inside of the bin. It's the outside of the bin area.
Okay, Vanessa is saying something. Can you just unmute her for a minute?
Who is cleaning inside the bins?
Yep. So that through this program and there's a lot more detail on this for some of these on our website and for instance on our FAQs at nyc.gov/Empire bin. Inside of the bin via a contractor that is part of this pilot program, they are responsible for regular maintenance and cleaning of the Empire bin.
How frequently?
Yeah, at least quarterly. So it can be more, it can be higher than that. But I want to give you what the right answer is. That's at minimum, it would be a quarterly. On our website for this program, we have a area where if there's any issues with the bin, you can report it to us and then we inspect it. So if, for instance, if there's something egregious and needs to be cleaned more frequently, as happened if a tomato truck spills tomato sauce all over it, we'll approach it in that way.
Okay.
Or if the key cards are lost or all those kinds of things.
Okay, and 18 inches doesn't go very far.
Okay. Thank you. I think I'm going to move next to, let me see. I want to go to Wendy Abrams. And just because I want to be very considerate of the time, those that have spoken before, I do want to move to those, just those who haven't yet, and also then go to our community board members. And then we will see if we have the time for round two. Just because I want to be very considerate of Andrew's time too. He's been so amazing in answering all our questions in detail. So with that, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just have a follow-up on some of the questions that were asked. I don't think Andrew answered. We're trying to get an idea of how do you calculate per building, how many bins would be required? I mean, you're talking 2 bins take up a parking spot, but is 2 bins for 25 apartments, 50 apartments, 120? I think we don't really understand how many bins buildings are even talking about. So that was one of my questions. My second question is, you said 2 bins per parking spot. You know, the difference is, you know, the average size of a car is about 14 feet by 6 feet by 5 feet high. We don't know unless I missed it. I don't really understand even the dimensions of these bins so that you can visualize exactly how these bins would look. The third part of my question was, you talk about the 18 inches that buildings are responsible for, which we understand. Does that mean that these bins are going to be placed 18 inches from the curb? They're going to move 18 inches out so that the buildings have access to cleaning the 18 inches that they're responsible for? And also, is it anticipated that these buildings, that these bins abut each other? So that's sort of my 4-part question, if you will. I know it's a lot. And one other comment is, if you have a road, a side street that is 32 feet wide and you have 2 bins or 4 bins or 6 bins across from each other, exactly how wide does that make for traffic to come down the street? it seems like, again, I'm in agreement with most of the people that spoke here. I don't think this is well thought out. I am opposed to it on many points, on logistical points, but I'm very opposed to it on the aesthetic points of this. I think that right now, having trash bags that sit low, that are only on the sidewalk X number of hours per day, as opposed to large oversized bins that will sit there 24 hours a day. And then an additional day of the week will have composting bins and recycling bins. Again, I'm very much opposed to this, but I would appreciate, Andrew, if you could just address my very quick questions.
Thanks, Wendy. I'll actually, for the space and placement questions, I really think that that while that's a perfectly valid question, page 54 of the DEIS gets into details with how the placement goes, the exact dimensions of the bins, and when they're multiple placed against what are basically code is or requirements are for them to be placed. So I would direct folks to try to look at that because it is very clear and laid out with pictures of how those how the placement happens in the specific dimensions. As far as the how many bins per building, I mean, it's a really complicated question. We do perform a waste generation analysis for properties that both sign up for this and also for the required 31 or more units. The waste generation analysis is basically how much material and of what types and where is placed at the curb per collection day, right? Because buildings put material out every single day, practically for every single in M8, every other day except for Sunday. So we're aware of the volume and the materials and the types that are placed at the curb, and we make an assessment based off of that. How many Empire bins could this property have based off of what the waste generation is? Additionally, what recycling is being put out at the building, what compost is being put out at the building. It really depends, and that is the answer that I would say. In M9, most 10 to 30 unit buildings would receive between 1 and 2 Empire bins that opted into the program. The average for the 31 or more unit buildings, which this can be a range, and I'm not trying to be tricky or funny or anything, it's just the reality of the housing stock there. They would have an average of 2 bins for those buildings.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. I, again, just because I want to be considerate of everyone's time, and especially Andrew's, just want to say that I think just let's keep our question limited to just questions, because I think the comments are, unless and until you are thinking totally opposite, I would say, we've heard so many people say their comments, and if you are agreeing with that, please don't mention, because, we just want to be considerate of everyone's time. It's a Monday evening. So, and there are many people who want to speak. And we want to close on time too. So with that, I'm David, David and then Patricia, and then I'm going to go towards our community board members. And yeah, so David, if you can just keep it brief.
Hi, thank you. I represent my co-op, which is on East 72nd Street. So as was mentioned before, my concerns are a little different than everybody else's, but specifically, we're asking our porters to now take how many trips, multiple trips, 10, 15 trips, go across 2 bike lanes, throw their stuff into the container, cross, and then repeat. And I just see that as being, fraught with accidents and lawsuits. I think East 72nd, particularly on the north side where the bike lane's going to be, needs very careful consideration. And both the Department of Sanitation and the DOT need to work together. These cannot be separate proposals that are completely in 2 different buckets. Everybody needs to be realistic and consider how this is going to work together. And, I agree with everybody's comments. I'm not going to go into the merits of that or parking, but this is definitely a concern. Both departments have to work together to provide a very realistic plan for East 72nd Street, and I guess for West 72nd as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David.
Is it okay to make up one note to the statement, or should I just hold it?
Go ahead.
With respect to if our placement of Empire bins majoritively goes to where trash has been placed, I don't want it to be assumed that if trash isn't being placed for this strip that has a bike lane there, if trash bags haven't been being placed there, then we wouldn't then automatically cite where the Empire bin is at. We cite based off of a lot of factors, and one of those factors is traditionally is the material going at the curb. Where's the building super reporter? Are they putting it? A lot of times they're putting it on the opposite street. Maybe if the avenue has the bike lane, if there's a street. Now, we are making the decision ultimately, but we put those different factors into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
I think I will go next to Patricia, because I think Patricia hasn't gone yet, hasn't spoken yet. Is that right, John? Okay, so please could you unmute her? And Patricia, again, if only it could be questions, that would be great. And listen until you have a very different comment. Is Patricia unmuted?
She is unmuted, yes.
I don't see her. Hi, Patricia, are you there? Hi, hello. Hi, Patricia. You know what, John, we can come back to her if she's having some tech trouble. Let's just go next to, okay, I think Patricia's back. I see her hand up. Can you unmute yourself, Patricia? John, can we help her? Okay, there you go.
Yes.
Go ahead, Patricia.
We still can't hear you, Patricia.
Yeah. So I think,
Move on to somebody else too.
yeah, let's just go ahead with Gail. Patricia, you can also maybe send us your comment if you want.
Hello.
Hi, Gail.
Yeah, I live in a building with 454 apartments. I imagine that we'll probably need close to something like 20 bins, 25 bins. What if my bins extend my property line, and the only space left is to go to my neighbor's property line? I'm sure that's going to happen quite a bit in the city with all the big buildings. What happens then? What do I do with my bins? If there's not enough space to put the bins out?
Andrew, do you want to take that question?
I think I won't speculate, but the idea is that buildings with 31 or more units will be required to have Empire bins.
Yes, but I'm saying I will need a lot of bins because we have 454 units in my building. How wide will that be? 454, the bins to accommodate 454 families.
Yeah, I don't have that number off the top of my head, how many bins. It really is going to have to be evaluated based off the waste generation survey that would be conducted and placing bins where they could be placed. If there's, a bus stop on your street, we can't place a bin there. If there's a fire hydrant, we can't place a bin there. If the streetscape doesn't allow for it, then we can't place it there. We'd have to find alternate locations. So that's what I'll say at this moment. I understand the emphasis of your question, right? But at this stage, our pilot in M9 and in Brooklyn 2 is showing that large buildings can participate in this program, and it really supports the waste issues that those buildings have. Even buildings larger than 400 plus units have been happily participating in this program. They go in the street.
And
Okay.
without abutting or going into the next building's property line, crossing the property line.
And that's not necessarily the case. The bins themselves could be in front of other properties technically, but we try not to do that. But they could.
If you didn't have enough space, would they could never be back to back, could they? That would never be a consideration. No, they can't do that. They have to be side by side by
Yeah,
side.
they'd be side by side. Similar on page 54 of the DIS kind of lays out how they'd be placed.
Okay,
If I
okay.
may interject here, thanks, Gail, for your note, and thank you, Andrew, for answering. We've just put in, the document again. So if you have any questions about how it looks, and all of these other details that Andrew have been highlighting, it's page 54. If you link on that, it will open up, and please go to 54 and you will have your answer that Andrew also provided us. So with that, I want to go to Valerie Mason, please.
Hi, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. And just start by saying thank you to Craig, and I appreciate Andrew being here. Andrew, I actually think you're looking at the wrong pages of the DEIS. The information you're talking about is at section 1.4.1, pages 10 and 11. And it gives you the size of the containers, which are 5 feet wide by approximately 5.25 feet tall. They're supposed to be placed within 12 inches of each. They're supposed to be placed 12 inches from the curb line. That would only make the property owner responsible for 6 more inches into the street on a 5-foot container that goes into the street. So I just point that out. And additionally, there's only 12 inches between the dumpsters, if you will. And there's also 1.3 inches from the bottom of the dumpster to the ground. Certainly enough room for a rat to go underneath. One of my questions for you is, you cited a 24% reduction in rats in CD9. Did you take out from that number the reduction caused by not having outdoor dining 12 months a year in that study?
No.
Okay, so you can't specifically say that was entirely due to the placement of these containers. Okay, I just want to make that clear. Also in that section on page 11, the last paragraph says that DSNY is responsible for cleaning and maintaining the stationary on-street containers. That's what the DEIS says. It does not say the property owner.
Yeah, and cleaning the inside of the bin, that is Department of Sanitation. Cleaning around it, that additional space that's on the ground, that is the property owners.
Okay, but in photo number 7, it shows the containers. How is so the street sweeper, this is almost like analogous to having an outdoor dining shed. The street sweeper is going to miss part of the curb because it's going to have to go around these things. So how is the area underneath the bin going to be cleaned? Because we all know the wind sweeps things underneath these bins. So who's responsible for that? Who's responsible for that?
Apologies for kind of getting that a little bit confusing. So sanitation is responsible for Empire bin cleaning. We can remove them. The vendor can scoop them and clean underneath and by the side of them. But we are, requiring the property manager still that 18 inches into the curb. That still requires that they have to have some responsibility around cleaning around it, the ground around the Empire bin. So some of that space, there is a little bit of a requirement for them to keep clean.
When you guys did the DEIS, and I'm focused on the DEIS, you chose 76th Street, which is between 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenue. That's where a public school is. It's not really representative of the neighborhood in terms of the prototypical street in our neighborhood. So the evaluation of the distances seems a little off. And in addition to that, in terms of measuring the parking, and I attended the DEIS hearing, and there wasn't one person who spoke from Zero Waste to community boards in Brooklyn, et cetera, who thought this was a good idea. The person from Zero Waste, who was actually on the Mondami transition team, said that this was a terrible plan. And one of the things that they talked about was the fact that these containers weren't on rollers and couldn't come out of the buildings, instead of them being stationary 24/7, 365 days a year. And I'm just a little confused. This was a pilot program. You guys have gone out and bought these Empire bins. You haven't even completed the DEIS, haven't you like put the cart before the horse here? Like you're already assuming that this was okay without getting the results from the pilot program or anything else. And can you also address, you talked about this study, when is it that you're going to come to the Upper East Side and talk to each of these buildings about what the program is for each of these buildings? How is that going to work?
Yeah, so specifically when we do outreach for the program is when the program opt-in period begins. So there's effectively thus far in M9 and in Brooklyn too, there's been a window for buildings to opt in or sign up, or for the larger properties to give us their information that are required under the current rules. They can, that month of outreach is when we engage with those buildings, whether it be via our info sessions or direct calls to property managers, or direct site visits that we do via either the operations team doing the waste generation surveys, or via the outreach team doing the literally door-to-door canvassing to talk to the building
Okay, but
staff.
if this program isn't going to be fully rolled out until 2032, in terms of a timeline, where is Community District 8 on your timeline?
There's not a timeline for when CB8 would be. There's not a specific timeline. It's just within that year. The next 6 set of districts are the only districts that have been publicly shared.
And which districts are those? Which districts?
Yeah, so that would include Bronx Community District 2 and 5. That includes Manhattan Community District 3, Queens Community District 2, and Staten Island Community District 1, and Brooklyn Community District 8.
Okay.
In addition to Brooklyn Community Board 2, which is starting this.
That's how my office is too.
Yeah, it's pretty frustrating.
Okay, just 2 more questions. When I was listening to the DEIS presentation, the fellow from DSNY kept talking about in our neighborhood in the prototypical study that they looked at a half a mile distance for being an acceptable distance because we had so many modes of transportation. And it was focused on the people who were residents here. It seemed to completely ignore the fact that we have shift workers here at hospitals, buildings, all sorts of things, because even though we're residential, we do have Bedpan Alley, we have colleges, we have people who are shift workers. These are people who can't afford, who come at night and drive from wherever they live to their jobs. They can't afford to go to the in-ground parking on the Upper East Side, which I tend to think $280 for the amount of time you're talking about. If you could locate that garage for me, I would certainly like to know where it is. And so would probably every other person who is street parking on the Upper East Side. So I think there was a large number of people that were left out. And in addition, with respect to the DEIS, while perhaps our parking, which was, obviously everyone's talked about the 10% that were much higher than anywhere else, losing spaces, except of course for the Upper West Side. And I will tell you that Gail Brewer testified at the hearing that she thought this was a significant problem for the Upper West Side. And we think so too, for a variety of different reasons. We don't think it has to do with being elite. It has to do with people who are working in the neighborhood. But in addition to that, we have elderly people. As somebody mentioned, we have an extremely older population who a half a mile from where they're supposed to be is there's no transportation that's going to get them from their parking space to where they need to be. And I think that this ignores that. And the other thing I think it ignores is there really a problem in our district with sanitation pickup? Because I think a lot of people have noted our trash can has been in containers, whether it's, for the most part, it's picked up. The streets are clean, the sidewalks are clean on the weekends. Are we solving for a problem that doesn't really exist on the Upper East Side? I mean, can we save the city a lot of money in this particular district? I'm always overwhelmed by how we have to do a one size fits all approach. If you ask a lot of the people who live on the Upper East Side and walk up and down the streets, it's not the larger buildings that are the trash problems. It's the smaller buildings who have containers that do not fit in their buildings that they can keep them in the back, and whose trash cans are overflowing that need an Empire bin. It's almost like it's backwards. If you have 1 to 9 apartments, maybe you need one bin for your building. But everybody, I think that there should be more evaluation or more working with the buildings to see if this is really necessary for every building in our district. And I think we can come to a compromise. So I'm urging everyone, I'm getting off now, to send in your comments on this. I also take a little bit of umbrage that however long it took the Department of Sanitation to do this DEIS, it gets presented in July when most community boards don't even have meetings. And I commend my Sanitation and Transportation Committee for having this meeting, because most boards don't even meet. And this is a public comment period that is it's basically 1 month in the summer about a program that will transform the streetscape of the city of New York. And I think it should be incumbent on DSNY to give the public more time to comment. And thank you for listening.
Thanks, Valerie. Thanks for all your comments. And like as Valerie just mentioned, please do send them to our community board. And also to sanitation. With that, I'm going to go to Michelle. And again,
thank you, Sahar. Yeah, I have a question and a few comments, but one thing I wanted to say up front, I don't think that we should mistake the fact that this is an all or nothing thing. I don't think we have to say that because we're concerned that we have plastic trash bags on the street, therefore we should go to this whole bin program as though there were nothing in between. There are a lot of things that we can do in between to both improve the system that we have and not to embark on something as draconian as this. I'll give you an example of my building. My building has an alleyway with a service entrance. If you would put a bin in front of my building, you'll be putting it in front of the service entrance. That's where the trash comes out. But that's also where move in, move out takes place. That's also where all delivery takes place. So you have to be very careful about the placement of these bins. What might be good for garbage collection might in fact impede the general operation of the rest of the building. We have a process where we have purchased many, 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 many years ago, plastic garbage bins, which are noiseless and are on wheels. Those plastic garbage bins are kept in our alleyway and filled with garbage and could be moved out to the curb when collection happens. Instead, because this is a requirement of the Department of Sanitation, those garbage bins can't be ruled out, but the plastic garbage within them has to be taken out and put on the street. That is clearly a rule that can be changed, because if each building put out their own bins, which they're using now anyway, and they only put them out at the time of collection, which they do now anyway, that certainly saves the visual blight, the mechanical blight, all of the aesthetics, the mechanics of having a big monster bin on the street 24/7, 365, when in fact it's not in use. And it would require no extra work of the sanitation workmen, who now lift those garbage and throw them in the can. My building, I think, would come under the 30 heading. So in fact, we probably could use this, but that's a question for Andrew. Can we wheel our own bins out, which would fulfill what your requirement is, and yet not leave them on the street? And to me, a good percentage of the buildings on the avenues have that same situation. They may not have the same number of apartments, they may be more or less, but they have service entrances, garage entry, something like that that could be utilized. I don't think we should throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, there's a lot of good things. The other thing is, it makes sense to have the rolly bins. So now you're going to substitute what are rolly bins, which make them movable, for big stationary bins, which make them immovable and problematic. The other thing is have you ever had a meeting? And these are a couple of questions I'd like the answer to. Number one, Andrew, about my building specifically. And number two, have you had meetings of managing agents? You are asking an awful lot of the staff of these buildings that will be new to the jobs that they already have. And if you want to bring people on board, or if you really want to hear how a building is managed and how those assignments are handled out, you should see managing agents. Meeting with individual buildings is fine, but managing agents handle way more than one building. That will cut the amount of buildings that you have to meet with individually. The other thing is, who got the maintenance contract for this, and who got the sales contract for this? Did you bid these out? Is this an American company or even a New York company? Can you tell me that? Who is the vendor here? And it may be two different vendors, the seller and the maintainer. And my last question is, you mentioned that historic districts would be taken under consideration. Can you please elaborate on that process, what you would do for them that wouldn't necessarily be done for others? So to sum up, 3 questions. My building that already has bins on wheels and can be moved up and down a service entrance. What do you do for historic districts? And how did the vendor, both the seller vendor and the maintenance vendor, get the projects?
So the first question regarding the building sizes, buildings with 10 to 30 units would be able to choose if they want to sign up for an Empire bin and use an Empire bin, or if they would want to use individual wheelie bins.
Yes,
they have
but
to be
I
the
just want,
NYC wheelie bin.
can I yes,
Yes,
I
go for it.
understood that point, but I have a finer point than that.
Okay.
Can the wheelie bins, if you are allowed to use them, be brought onto the street and left there for the sanitation? See, at the moment, you can have wheelie bins, but you're not allowed to bring them onto the street.
That's correct. They have to be at the curb.
Now, wouldn't it make, no, that's what I mean, at the curb. You're not allowed to bring them at the curb. You have to bring them from your service or garbage area, whatever your building has. You have to take those plastic bags out of the wheelie bins and put the plastic bags at the curb. Wouldn't it make more sense, since you're concerned about rats and rodents, to wheel the whole wheelie bin out to the curb?
I'm not certain that specific detail, what you're saying, that why we would not be allowed to put your bin
No,
at the
at the
curb, but that
moment,
is
you have to empty the trash. You have to take the trash out of the wheelie bins, which are on wheels.
if they're with bins that are 55 gallons or less,
Yeah.
your building could be setting that at the curb.
Okay,
that
that's a
specific
new
bin.
rule.
And right now for buildings with 1 to 9 units, they have to use the NYC bin. As far as this program goes, for buildings that opt to use individual wheelie bins, it is with our NYC bin as well.
But you can bring them to the curb.
That's correct. They'd be placed
Okay.
at the curb for
So
collection.
that's new. And who are the vendors?
Yeah,
and
Contenor is the name
historical-
of the vendor, and maybe I can drop that in the chat. It's a DCAS requirements contract. So this is meaning that they're the vendor that we have to use. The truck is specifically built by a Spanish company and a Mack truck. It's a sort of a split body. Part of the chassis is coming from Europe, part of the vehicle's coming from Europe, and the chassis is coming from Mack. Mack makes the truck. So I'll have to follow up with the specific details. We have it outlined. It's just off the top of my head.
No, I can understand that you wouldn't know it, but I wouldn't mind knowing that, because I want to know if it was a big contract, who did the sales and where they come from, and then if it's a separate contract on the maintenance, I don't know. And lastly, the process for the historic districts.
Yeah, no, processes as far as we wouldn't install permanently the Empire bin into the ground if there is, for instance, like a cobblestone street, or we wouldn't place it in front of a historic monument, or in front of parks, or in front of those kind of like locations that are sort of registered via the historic preservation organizations, right? If a building has that sort of evaluation already, then we wouldn't place the Empire bin in front of that like entrance, or in front of the monument, or in front of the structure. And if it's a building that is just in that type of historic district or neighborhood, and there's, say, for instance, cobblestone streets, we don't permanently anchor the Empire bin into the ground. It is just placed on the pad.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I think with that, maybe I'm going to move forward just again because it's 8:26 already. A long day for Andrew as well. Thank you, Michelle, for all your questions. I will request, please, keep your comments and questions very brief. I'm going to go to you next, DJ. And I'm just going to sorry, before we move forward and DJ, you speak, just want to say, just because of the time factor, I'm just going to go for the board members at this moment because everyone else has spoken before. So we wouldn't be going back just because of the, because it's very late and want to be considered for Andrew's time. So go ahead, DJ.
Sure. Zahar, in deference to you, I had some comments. I'll just say I'm in favor of the program and stick to questions. Andrew, I couldn't really find this, and maybe it's getting too far into anecdotes, but a lot of the questions about the program tonight are about basically things that could go wrong with it. What are people in CD9 saying? And I know, man on the street interviews, things like that shouldn't necessarily be taken as comprehensive data, but it can be instructive. Does any of that exist either from public reporting or elsewhere?
No, that I've gotten that question from other community boards, and I do think that taking sanitation out of it and reaching out to M9 and their leadership at Community Board 9 and talking and setting up a committee meeting to meeting, that's probably how you would find the most unbiased information. They have been proponents of it from going from I've witnessing how the program is started there. I have seen the skepticism, not the right word, but it's necessary skepticism or necessary pushback to accepting and appreciation of the program, I would say, from many building supers, building staff, the community board itself. I believe you should reach out to them and talk to them about it. And also the program, it did come out of, there was a lot of concern for parking. And I think people who've talked about that who I've talked to there, I think they're like framing it as a beneficial trade-off.
Okay,
thank you
so much. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Next, Lori, Sebastian, Sarah, and then Peggy would be the last one.
Okay, thank you, Sahar. I must say, do you hear me? I look like I'm frozen. Okay.
No, we can hear you.
I too am in support of this program. I was in Spain a number of years ago, and I saw those trucks that lift up and dump the I don't know what you were calling them, but dump the garbage into the truck, and they seem to work beautifully. And like I was in Barcelona, and Barcelona has very narrow streets, so I know that it can be worked out. As far as the aesthetics go, I was just thinking about how in my building, I live on East End Avenue, so I'm right near Gracie Mansion, right across the street from Gracie Mansion, very residential area. And I walk my dog every night. And if I don't see another rat coming out of one of those black plastic bags for the rest of my life, it'll be too soon, because it's really disgusting. Those black bags, you can always count on, somebody moving around and a rat coming out. So I am totally in support of this program. However, when we talk about aesthetics, my building, because it's on East End Avenue, it takes up the entire block between 88th and 89th Street. And so bins on the side of the building wouldn't be an aesthetic problem. And so I don't think it's a problem, even if it's a large building, which mine is, and the one next door, which is also a large building, they've got the side streets to put the bins on. But I do understand the aesthetic problem of having bins right in front of your building. I mean, that's kind of a, not very appealing process. So my question is there any consideration for the placement of the bins that wouldn't involve being right in front of the building?
So there's not exactly like a dialogue taking place with our auditing unit that's going out in advance of placement or in advance of the program even being available in that zone. We're evaluating where Empire bins could go. We certainly have placed them on the opposite side of the building before, or on the other street. If you're talking about your buildings on the avenue, sometimes there have been placed on the street on the the exact corner that's there. So I want to be clear. We're not working building by building with the property owner or manager or what have you. We're not engaging with them. We're assessing where this could be placed. And if it's determined that we can place one there and the building has the requirements, like just 31 or more units, then we'll place them. Then we'll install them when that time comes.
Okay, all right. I would just like to request that the department takes into account the aesthetics, because nobody wants a big garbage bin right in the front of their building.
Yeah, we try not to place it in front of the entrance.
Yeah.
Now I'm saying that, but also there are fire hydrants, there are bus stops, bus
Yeah.
shelters, all those other types of things that we do this in coordination with DOT at the same time, and they really are assessing where the streetscape has available spaces, and then we, install based on that.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really great. Thank you very much. And I do really appreciate you guys doing this, because it really, we have to do something about, the rats and our garbage. And thank you for doing it.
Okay, thank you, Laurie. And thanks, Andrew, for answering. I just want to add a small note that the original notice of availability of final scope of work, that the comments are till August 7th. So any written comments should be sent before August 7th if you want to take part in that. So, and that has been shared in the chat. So please make sure that if you still have comments, you want to add that, put it in writing, then please do so by August 7th. With that,
I was going to share the is it in the chat who to send comments to, or otherwise let's go put okay. I was going to try to put up the last slide, but I don't need to do that then.
Thank you. Yeah, no, John added that. So just want to highlight that it is there. Please make sure that you copy it and then do send your comments in writing. With that, I'm going to take Sarah next, and then Peggy, and then I guess Sebastian went off. So we'll just go with Peggy, and she'll be the last one. And please be brief. Thank you.
Thank you, Sahar, and thank you, Andrew, for toughing it out with us tonight. I have a comment, a recommendation, and a question. So my comment is that I want to reference what Lucy said about drivers, and there are many reasons why people need cars, and Valerie did a great job of explaining why. And I think it's quite audacious to assume that everyone who drives is wealthy. And there's a reason why people park on the street. And I'm sure that all the street parkers would love a free garage spot. So I would hope that commenters can stop making sweeping generalizations about why people may need cars, and instead think about expanding their views of why that might be. My recommendation is, I think that tonight we've heard about a lot of buildings that have very specific and difficult conditions that are not completely addressed by the DEIS. The DEIS does provide guidance on how siting will work, but there will always be special conditions of buildings that don't fit squarely into what DSNY has experienced in Manhattan 9, or what they may have proposed in the DEIS. And so for that, I would recommend that either the community board make this recommendation, or Bryce, I see you here. If the council member would consider asking for some sort of process where buildings can qualify for or opt into special consultation with the DSNY, because at present the process as delineated is very directed, and so DSNY chooses who it consults with, how it consults, and directs where the containers go, and there's no appeal process. And so if there is some sort of way that buildings that have special conditions, so for example, I live in a landmark building that is a very large residential building. We are next to another very large residential building that is also a landmark, and we have frontage on a park and a public school. And that severely limits our curb area that where we could place bins, and there will be a lot of bins that need to be placed. And so I think that, and especially with old buildings, the mechanics and how the infrastructure and how they work and how the building staff work, that I would want my building to have a say in how the bins are placed. And the last one is a question. Andrew, when you responded to Michelle's question about the historic districts, you referenced the whether or not bins would be attached to cobblestone streets. And that is in the DEIS, but what isn't in the DEIS is exactly what the process would be for LPC permitting in historic districts or individual landmarks. And it just says that there will be a permitting process. But I think it's important for us to know who the applicant will be, whether this will be a staff level decision or if this will go to the community board, and what sort of agency or public process is involved. And so you may not have those details tonight, but I would like to ask if you have a sense of what that LPC permitting process would be if we're talking about bin placement and not referencing cobblestone streets. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that last question. I don't have anything to say towards it at this moment. It's something we can review and try to get back to the community board. This is the draft environmental impact statement. So if things like that are placed in the comments, we have to address these comments and then have a finalized environmental impact statement, where comments like that could actually be built into the report itself. So just wanted to name that. Finally, just wanted to name if working with electeds on improvements of this program, there is a rulemaking process for every district that has to go into effect when the program rolls out, and that is certainly another additional area for comments and feedback and critiques or optimizations of the program, if I'm hearing that from you, Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Andrew. I do want to mention that, Bryce, thank you for joining us from Councilmember Maloney's office. Wanted to give you a shout out and, being with us and listening to what Sarah said and what others said too. So thank you for being there.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you have a comment, Bryce, you're more than welcome. Otherwise, we'll send, yeah.
I have many thoughts, including as someone who just had to fork up $642 because rats ate the wiring in my car that was parked on the street. So I can see this from virtually all sides, but I will definitely be reporting back to the council member on all the sentiments I'm hearing here, and definitely a lot of unanswered questions. But I thank you for letting me just say good evening. And Councilmember Maloney is not in town, but I will be reporting to her. And thanks for putting this together.
We really appreciate it. Thanks, Bryce. So with that, Peggy is the last one to speak. So please.
Thanks very much, Sahar, and thanks to Craig for your excellent report. My issue and question is in where I live, there is the sanitation problem is the overflowing garbage cans and litter everywhere. Litter worsened by the fact that there are overflowing garbage cans which are not collected often enough. I'm wondering whether this new program would in some way improve that basic situation of garbage just overflowing onto the streets and sidewalks. So if you could address that, I'd be grateful.
So from what I've seen in Manhattan Community District 9, which is the only zone that has this program right now, it certainly has improved on-street litter. We still operate our basket service on a regular frequency, and we also, with this program, have additional. It's a pilot, so we have additional staffing resources, including enforcement and including supervisors who are based in the zone for this program. So. Um, when a supervisor, a field supervisor, or a zone supervisor sees an overflowing basket, because they're there for this program, they can more easily report that to the garage, who can then relay the truck, a collection truck, to go get it. So it's more just due to the fact that there's additional resources because we have a lot of eyes on this program where it's at in M9 and soon to be in Brooklyn Community District 2. So that's how I'll say to that. I think that the issue that you're having with public litter is causing bins to overflow can also, just naming this for everyone's, if you can report that to 311, then that also allows us to, remedy that by servicing that location and servicing that area as soon as possible. In the zone that we actually have this program, we're seeing that happens more because there's an actual dedicated field enforcement supervisor for this program.
So you're saying that it would reduce the overflow of and the garbage cans and the litter because someone would be around to observe it more, or is there something fundamental to the new plan that would
No, it's based on because there's additional staffing resources that have eyes in the zone that are making more observations. It's what that's based off of.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sahar,
Yes, Chuck.
I think what observing what went on tonight, it seems to me that we ought to say we're going to make some comments on the DEIS. That's what really this hearing is about today. And I think that as I look at it, and I think the comments of being able to interact with the department are also something that would be helpful to make. In that regard, I want to thank Andrew Hoyles, who spent a lot of time and late into the evening here. I appreciate it, lighting the lights in his office. And so, again, thank you, Andrew. But I think as I looked at the DEIS, I didn't look at the whole thing. Craig did a great job of laying it out. It seems to me there are a couple of areas that cover a lot of what we were talking about. One is the parking situation, and I think there were a lot of, we looked at that section, there were a lot of conclusions that I think were not particularly warranted. And one of the things, when they talk about going to a half-mile radius, that really can't be used in Manhattan. It can be used outside of Manhattan. And so I think that's something that where they don't have it right. And they basically say that we're going to have an impact, or we're going to have significant, we have significant deviations here, but it won't have an impact because of transit. And we have all these alternatives. But I don't think there's a real careful look at the alternative, how that impacts the people in our district. And as someone mentioned, we have a very, very high percentage of elderly people and people who have difficulties in getting around. The second, there's a section on urban design and visual resources. And that's what it's come up with a lot of discussions in it. And in that section, they're just very conclusory and say, we don't think this is going to cause this to be better than the bags. And they show a selection of pictures where you have one of the small containers, a couple of the big containers, but they don't show a picture of what it would be like if you had a bunch of containers lined up in front of a building or in front of a couple of buildings, and how that would work. So I think that's something that we can comment about. So I would say, there may be others, but what comes to my mind is something about the comment on the parking situation, parking on the urban design issues, and also a comment about interacting with the department, if you have special situations in your building to make sure you can minimize some of these impacts. And I think if that's something, then I think that a couple of us could probably get together because we have a very short deadline. Valerie made the point, which I think was right, that even if we have a short deadline that's in the middle of the summer, it's going to be very hard. And anything that we do has to be done this week, essentially. Probably later, but I think we want to get it in by this Friday. And so then we can maybe put our heads together and come up with some language. So that's what I would suggest we do, as our two committees, if that's, if that makes sense to Sahar and Addison and Craig.
That works for me.
Works for me too. Great idea.
Any other thoughts from from the committee? Any members? Yeah, Michelle, one comment, or Valerie? Let me call Valerie.
Yeah.
She's our chair. Go ahead, Valerie. And we can also have you. We'll send some.
I think Craig, I think Chuck, I think those are the right comments vis-a-vis. That's what we're being asked to comment on, the actual DEIS. I think it's been great that Andrew has given us a lot more specifics, but I think in drafting the DEIS, those are exactly the kind of comments we should make, is that these areas need more study. And I think those are appropriate. And I would hope that everyone on the board could agree that we should at least ask those questions and have the DEIS address it, since they did use us as the quote unquote prototypical neighborhood. So I would be in favor of a letter that we put together in terms of comments that address those couple of areas, because whether, Lori's talking about aesthetics, it's aesthetics, but it's also, you're right, the only place they've ever showed all of these cans together is behind a school where they've had 10. And it doesn't really address buildings that only have one entrance. It's in the front of the building. And when I say in the front of the building, I mean, it's not the front door, but there's only one place, and that's in front of the building. So I agree with that. I think we can limit it to those 3 comments. And if people have more comments, they can see where you're supposed to put in your comments. Everyone should address their own comments and make them as specific as they want. But I'm in favor of doing that. I would hope that the board would be in favor of that. If we can maybe and appreciate everyone's time, maybe we can just get a show of hands from the people who are on the board right now that we would approve at least doing a letter that addresses the points that Chuck discussed.
So it sounds like we have everyone but DJ. Oh, DJ. Okay, good.
Wait,
Lori?
Sebastian. I think Sebastian is
No.
also.
Sebastian. It sounds like we have a majority, so.
Yeah, majority, yes.
Okay. Super.
Lavinia, would like to make a comment? Or you just raise your hand?
She's on board, Chuck.
Yeah.
You unmuted me? Yeah, I'm on board with that. I wanted to say, I know time is very short, but if it would be possible for you to circulate that letter that you come up with, so to those of us that are here on the committee or board members, however you want to do it, so that we could just have any additional input if necessary.
Yeah, I think we'll try to do that, get that done if we can. We'll have to put our heads together and then we'll.
Yeah, time is short.
Yeah. And since Chuck is our environmental expert, I'm going to ask Chuck if he'll take a first crack at it for us.
Okay.
I'll exercise my chair prerogative to. It's like the Supreme Court with the Chief Justice. I assign the opinion to you, Chuck.
All right, with that.
I was going to say, after putting together the presentation, not I.
Craig, your presentation is going to be copied everywhere. I know people are taking pictures of all those slides tonight. Once again, we are indebted to you.
Thank you. Well, with that, I would just like to take one moment to make some comments on my own, if no one minds.
Sure.
So just one technical comment that I want to make, and this just builds off of what Chuck alluded to before. The idea that we could expand the parking area to a half mile really doesn't make much sense, and I think the final EAF should look to clarify it. So if there's like a lack of spaces within a quarter mile radius that's caused by containerization, it would defy logic that you wouldn't have the spaces that they claim will exist if you go beyond that half mile rate or to expand it to within a half mile, and that they also wouldn't be impacted. So I don't know whether that is just um, poorly worded or if it is a flawed analysis, but I do think that that should be reconsidered along with just the whole idea of expanding it to a half mile. But
Yeah.
beyond that, and I don't know that anyone's going to be so surprised, to paraphrase Bob Barker, I think we should help control the rat population and have our trash in bins and containers. In all seriousness, there's literally nothing that irks me more about our amazing city than to see our beautiful streetscape ruined by piles of trash that are piled on sidewalks, attracting rats and creating stenches, especially in the winter when trash seems to sit out longer. I'm a veteran of the whole Marine Transfer Station battle at East 91st Street, and I was among the many neighbors of the proposed and now operating facility that was very skeptical of the findings of that EIS, which I actually did an entire project on in grad school as I was trying to learn about it. And I couldn't fathom that a facility could operate with minimal impacts, and that it wouldn't generate odors in the vicinity or create air quality issues. And as the former co-chair of the community advisory group for the East 91st Street Marine Transfer Station, I do give credit to the Department of Sanitation for being a good neighbor and upholding their many commitments to our community and ensuring that the facility would not cause issues. And by and large, it really hasn't. And I live in what I believe is, as the crow flies, the closest building to the actual Marine Transfer Station itself. So I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt with this program. Change is hard, and I understand why many in attendance are not on board with the proposed program as it is um, currently presented. And I hear the concerns that have been expressed. I do think we need to be open to change, and I think there are tremendous benefits that can result from it. I'm a little bit less sympathetic to the parking argument, as I think we do take for granted that parking is the primary purpose of the curbside when in fact it's a public good that is primarily being used by a disproportionately small percentage of people that have cars. And that's not intended to be a slight against car owners or suggest whether people are aren't able to pay to park without it being a burden. But I would just rather have a more organized way of conducting sanitation collection that is not doesn't include piling up trash on sidewalks that is a haphazard approach that could be at times really truly disgusting. So I hope the pilots that are in place or will soon be in place will generate good data and lessons learned. And I look forward to seeing our bins in our neighborhood after the program is refined and improved upon to hopefully address many of the concerns that were heard tonight, which I do think are really important concerns and need to be addressed as the Department of Sanitation does look to finalize this EIS. So with that, I've been asked on behalf of the co-chairs to wrap up this meeting. So just, I think, looking forward, this is not going to be the last discussion on this topic. And everyone will surely have more opportunities to discuss this program at future CB8 meetings. And I anticipate that we'll be discussing this again in a formal way when the final EIS is issued. And again, when the rulemaking process occurs, because that's where we will really learn a lot more about the program and whether many of the comments and questions that we raised were being addressed. In the meantime, we've definitely collected a lot of great feedback, and I want to thank everyone for participating. I want to thank Andrew for his thoughtful and helpful responses and for his endurance for making it nearly 2.5 hours through this meeting. So we are grateful that everyone in attendance tonight has given us much to work with as we compile the comments, and we will do our best to be able to, as Michelle asked, to circulate it to be able to get it out before the deadline. And I think one of our comments will clearly be that we should have had more time to review this. So once we are done, we will definitely post our official comments. And I think that's where we are right now. So with that, thank you, everyone. And is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn since I'm unmuted.
Okay, second.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Yay,
Have a good
CB8.
night.